Hi, this is Larry Hatch, horticultural taxonomist with cultivar.org, with another episode of Interesting Cultivars of Houseplants. And today's title is Yes, There Are 272 Varieties of Syngonium, or arrowhead plant. And the reason I know is I and a number of other Syngonium collectors and aroid lovers got together and created a checklist a number of years ago, and we came up with 193. We came back earlier this year, 2021, updated the list, and what do you know? It was about 272 varieties. And there's a lot more synonyms, so there's over 300 different names been applied to cultivated clonal varieties, mostly clones, in the genus. And we have them on the internet free, and that's the good news. I'm not going to give you a 1-second blip of all 272. That would be sort of stupid, because I don't have pictures of all of them anyway. So the first thing, in fact, you could probably skip this video if you wanted to get to the hardcore stuff. Go to cultivar.org, www.cultivar.org, which is a website devoted to the best varieties of ornamental landscape plants, the most complete encyclopedias of their type, whether it be woody plants, house plants, or hardy herbaceous perennials. And just click on the Syngonium tab right there. You see it in the kind of olive green. And that'll take you right to our study, our monograph of 272 cultivars, and that's probably going to be 280 some very soon, because we update it frequently. And this is all free, nothing to sign up, no login or nothing, so it's all there. And we've done it with experts, with literature, with catalogs that are authorities, and we know we have the right names, or at least if we don't know the right name, we're going to say these are the choices of names, and so on. But in most cases, a lot of these things are patented. A lot of these things have a defined introduction date, so we know which catalogs they were published in. So we know what the correct names are based on who published it first, who created it, who patented it. There's also some academic literature, particularly from the University of Florida, studying Syngonium cultivars and their DNA, actually. And you can find that information in cultivar.org's file. And the University of Florida had a huge collection of these things, and they actually hybridized some and studied the literature, the patents, and so on. And their literature from Dr. Henney and others is very authoritative on the choice of names. And we'll get into names a little bit later. I'm just going to point out maybe a dozen or so of my favorite ones. Our first one I have here that I've always loved, and it's readily available, at least in the United States. It's called Holly M, commonly sold as Holly, but Holly M is the correct original name. And it's got a very wide blade, and it's mostly white, but it fades to kind of a greenish white. Some people call it a mint color, but it's a really beautiful plant, very durable. And how many times do you get a white leaf plant in your garden? Not very often, so it's pretty good. The next one I really like is Mottled Arrowhead. And you can see from my scan here. By the way, these first two are scans done in a flatbed scanner, like graphic artists do, which is essentially like a color photocopier. And you put the leaves in fresh. These are not like herbarium leaves where they're dried and discolored and wrinkled. These are fresh leaves, cut off the plant. There's no petioles and so on. And they're scanned. They're color corrected if necessary for accurate color. There's usually a ruler or a coin for scale. These are U.S. quarters, and these document the colors of it. Flatbed, it's not like a flatbed scanner for a leaf like this. It's basically flat. The next one I really like is Pink Illusion. It's a really durable plant, and it's mostly pink leaves fading to green. Neon or Neon Robusta, which should be called Neon Robust, because Latin is not allowed anymore in plant names, is a really good one. It's very durable. So either Pink Illusion, Neon, which is the original one, or Neon Robust are good. And by the way, Neon Robust was derived from neon, so they're not the same plant. The robust version is stronger and got a wider blade. So people say they're the same thing. No, they're not. All you gotta do is look at the U.S. patent application. One came from the other. So, just a matter of doing the research, finding out what's what legally and so on. And by the way, January 1st, 1959 was a cutoff. Plant cultivars or cultivated varieties cannot be named in Latin after that date. So you have people coming around saying, "Oh, I got an elbow this and an aria this." Well, if that name was not published before 1959, it's invalid and has to be given a vernacular name, just a common name. And some of us are trying to fix that because commerce is bound in most countries by commercial codes that require correct nomenclature. It's fraud to sell something knowingly under a wrong name, no matter what kind of product it is, and that applies to plants. Nurseries have been fined for selling stuff under incorrect names when they knew that. And we'll talk about the authorities for nomenclature, because when it comes to syngoniums, they're really screwed up. And it took us months and months to get this stuff figured out. And so we're doing the research for you, and you can do some of the research for us, and we can all share the information together. Because if we're wrong and you have some better information than we have, we're going to make a change. Promise you that. The next one I really like is called Tri-Leaf Wonder. And that's a beautiful plant. By the way, all these syngoniums have an adult phase and a juvenile phase and intermediate phases. But basically the juvenile phase is the arrowhead or sagittate type leaf that we're familiar with. But as they mature as vines, they develop this type of leaf that has 3 leaflets. And Tri-Leaf Wonder was patented in the United States for this particular color pattern and this particular phase. And phases can be cultivars, as we know from English ivies. The adult phases, get different names because they are different. Another one I really, really like is this one called Panda. Absolutely exquisite. It's got a dark glossy green leaf and kind of a lime chartreuse set of spotting. And when it's well grown, it's got lots of spots. Fortunately, it's one of the more expensive ones. So I'm often asked, well, if all this name chaos is going around, who's the authority for this stuff? How do we know who's right? And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about that, because this applies to aroids generally and pretty much any house plant or outdoor plant. How do we know what names are correct? Because there's a lot of confusion, really. So what are the name authorities? Well, there's 2 sets of name authorities generally. For wild or species plants, we generally look at the local floras, because the local botanists know the populations better than anybody. So it could be the flora of Brazil, flora of Indonesia, flora of Tennessee, flora of Russia. So we study those, and those experts know their local populations of plants, so they often take the highest point. The naming of plants is governed by something called the ICBN, the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, saying how names have to be formed and spelled. There's also things called monographs, where a botanist, or in some cases a horticulturist, will write a book or a paper on the species of so-and-so. And those are experts too. We also can confer with experts who have published or not published. Collectors often many times. They're very knowledgeable, and they know the monographs, the code of nomenclature, and the local floras, and they are experts in such. And the second category is garden or cultivated plants. That's a whole different thing. Reference books, authoritative reference books, are valid publication. And according to the ICNCP, the International Nomenclature of Cultivated Plants, which is legally binding internationally for commerce, when people have been accused of name fraud of plants and it goes to a court, they use this international standard of whether the plants were named correctly and so on. The reference books by authorities and experts are very paramount. You can say, so-and-so, this expert, on page 345 of their 1981 edition, said this. There's also horticultural monographs, and the one we have at cultivar.org fits that category. There are also plant patents. I left that out. When a plant is patented, that becomes a legal document as to its correct name, whether a cultivar or a trademark. And there's trademarks too. And how do you know somebody's an expert? Well, they generally will refer to the literature. In the scientific realm, you refer to the literature. So-and-so in this year, in this book, on this page, said this was the correct name and the correct description, but it was often confused with this. And so you cite the literature in an academic manner that's scientifically precise, and that stuff will hold up in court or anywhere else that somebody questions you. It's also very important to know, I love social media, but, well, Joe on Instagram said this is the correct name. Well, Mary on Facebook said this is the correct name. That doesn't mean a diddly squat. Unless they're backing their stuff up with references, the nomenclature codes, literature, floras, monographs, patent information, they don't mean anything. I don't care if they've been collecting this stuff 100 years. If they don't have legally binding information of an academic nature, their choices of names are not necessarily correct. For example, there's a botanical variety or species of Syngonium called rayi, R-A-Y-I. And it used to be in Wendlandii, but it's now considered a separate species, Syngonium rayi. Well, everybody's selling it as rayi, 2 I's. Well, in fact, I Googled it, and there were 8,660 people selling it or talking about it as Ray with 2 I's. Well, in Latin, according to these codes, if the base name Ray, R-A-Y, ends in a vowel or a Y, you just add 1 I. So it's not the normal rule where you add 2 I's on the end. You just add 1 I. So it's rayi, Syngonium rayi. And again, thousands of people selling it, growing it, talking about it, YouTubing about it, dare I say, are wrong. And guess what? If you'd just taken a second to check it, you could find out that was incorrect. So I'm gonna give some of the major name authorities in general. Like I say, the monographs and the local floras. There's too many of those to list or link to. The king of houseplant books that everybody's citing is a guy named Alfred B. Groff. He was a collector, a grower, a scientist, and he went around the United States and Europe, looked at all the collections, sorted out what was what, and wrote 2 amazing books. It should be Exotica, not Exotic. Exotica and Tropica. And he wrote these huge encyclopedias. They used to be hundreds of dollars each. You can get them cheaper now. Your local library may have them. And he just put down all of these plants, their pictures, their descriptions, the correct names as he knew them from information. And he got a lot of the names from the originators. So somebody created a cultivar, whether they patented it or not, and the originator said, oh yeah, this is the correct name, Somebody else has called it something else, but I'm the originator. So he documented, oh yeah, this came from so-and-so at so-and-so's nursery. This is the correct name. So under the nomenclature codes, the cultivated code, the ICNCP, the originator gets to decide what the correct name is as long as they follow the rules, like not using Latin after 1959, that kind of thing. So the originator gets to decide what his plant is called because he created it. So Groff documented all this, and his books are a little bit outdated from the 70s, but really good place to start. Also, Hortus Thur has a lot of cultivars and species documented. It's too out of date, but it's a good place to start. There's a huge website called efloras.org. A whole lot of taxonomists and botanists and ecologists got together and said, well, we need to publish our stuff digitally where people can have access to it. And you'll find a lot of the floras, which is a study of the local plant populations, are on there, particularly the flora of China. And a lot of our plants do come from Asia in the houseplant world. So efloras.org is a great place. The it's International Aroid Society, aroid.org, has a large number of articles, a database, again by experts and people that cite literature, that actually create literature because they publish original studies. So aroid.org is great for aroid research. I put in one of the floras here. It's the flora of Brazil. That relates to a lot of our houseplants, and that link is there. For a general reference on tropical plants, I would recommend plantsoftheworldonline.org. And that sounds like, what? Well, that's backed up by the scientists at Kew Gardens in London, who have, for like 200 years, been the botanical authorities. They have the largest herbarium in the world, the largest botanical garden in the world. They have these plants, a lot of them, and they study the wild populations. So plantsoftheworldonline.org is a great place to type in your houseplant names to see if they're correct and if there's reasons for name changes. And like I said, they cite the literature. It's very important. Somebody's not citing literature and patents as their authority. It's just an opinion. It's just vapor, hot air. So plantsoftheworldonline.org from Kew Gardens, with their enormous world-class clout, they're going to tell you why that's the right name, and which flora and author determined that. We also recommend the Horticultural Database of the Royal Horticultural Society. They work with Kew and others to keep their names correct, and that link is there. I use that like weekly. And also my own database, Hatch's Interior Plants at cultivar.org, where our study of 272 varieties of Syngonium is found free. I've worked on that for 40 years. So I take information from all the stuff at the top, many other sources, my own research, and so on, and put that into a huge houseplant encyclopedia, and people are citing that as a reference as well. And again, I'm doing things the right, legal, scientific way to document things. And if we don't know the answer, I'll just say I don't know the answer. But in most cases, we can determine what the correct name of a plant is. I'm not going to belabor these points too much, but let me move on. Here is another Syngonium, and I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. It's Aomnak, Omnak, I think it is. I have not grown this particular one, but it's very hot right now, very expensive. It's the darkest pink of the Syngoniums that has a coverage over the entire leaf, and it's a super dark pink, nothing like it. So that's one. Aomnak is out there. Another one that's really expensive as well, is red spotted tricolor. I just happen to like that one. It's a pink modeling overlaying a green leaf. It's also modeled cream. So it's got big pink zones, small white zones, and the rest is green. It's a really great thing. Again, expect to pay a couple $100 for a small plant of that. Another trend in Syngoniums are the narrowly sagittate blades, like this Holly Ribbon and a couple others. This one is called NGERN LAIMA, Nigern I believe it is pronounced. And it's kind of like a holly type, all white, but a very narrow blade. Kind of reminds you of some of the caladiums actually that have the lance leaf blades. And I think we're probably going to get this lance leaf type leaf shape in all the Syngonium colors eventually. Since that genetics is in there, we'll probably get other colors in this, but right now they're mostly in whites and greens. Another one that I really like is Gold Illusion, and it's not really gold. It's kind of a creamy yellow, but what's nice about it is it has dark pink or violet red veins, and it's slightly mottled towards the margins. You can literally find it in the United States in every box store, almost all the time, Home Depot, Lowe's, Kmart, just any of those big stores are going to have this thing, probably from Exotic Plants, which is known as Costa Farms. You can get them for like $2 and they'll grow into these big, beautiful plants. That's one that's very affordable, very colorful. Another one that's pretty rare that I do not have yet is called Scrambled Eggs. And it's probably a Winlantii. I'm not sure because of the white, silvery white down the center. But it's overlaid with a yellow to yellow-green chimera, kind of like scrambled eggs was thrown on it. That's kind of crazy looking, but it's interesting. So scrambled eggs is another one. One that's kind of come back into favor is elbow variegatum. People call it elbow. You really shouldn't abbreviate these things because it gets confusing. Because there's actually an elbow vitatum, an elbow marginatum. If you say elbow, which one are you talking about? It's elbow variegatum if it's got huge white sectors and mottling in it. You can see I grew this one back in 2009. I had it actually before that. And I planted it outside as a tropical bedding plant. And that plant that you see there turned into this huge bush about 3 feet wide and 2.5 feet tall. And I couldn't give away the cuttings I got off of it. I mean, I literally threw them out. What would they be worth today? By the way, you really shouldn't pay more than $20 or $30 for one of those at the most. The thing grows like a weed. It really is a weed. And anybody's charging you $100 for one of those, they got a problem. Because it's just crazy. I said I liked Holly M. Just for being a super white. The one that's probably even better, it's this one here called Moonshine, also called Moonlight. It's got more of a green midrib than Holly does, and it's got more of a texture to it. Holly is kind of a flat. This one has some interveinal texture, so it's kind of a little more interesting. Again, it's going to be expensive. On the weird side, we have this one here called Shell Shocked, which probably most people know as Godzilla. Well, how do we know it's called Shell Shocked? Because it was published by Asiatic Nursery, who imported it to the United States in the 80s and 90s and grew it, and they said it doesn't have a legitimate name. So they published it as Shell Shocked. Well, that was a valid publication by a nursery catalog, and we have that all documented. But then somebody says, oh, I don't think it has a name. So they renamed it Godzilla. Well, after somebody had already named it. So, again, having knowledge of catalogs, literature, books, floras, websites. That'll teach you the right names, because whoever publishes it first has the right to the name, unless somebody else claims to be the originator. So if the originator of it says, I don't approve Shell Shock, Godzilla's the right name, Godzilla would be the right name. But as far as we know, the originators did not name it, so Barry Yinger published it as Shell Shocked, and that's the name that we go by. Another one I really like, and it's pretty common in the United States still, is Green Star, and this was from our trials in 2009. I think we were up to 50 cultivars at that time. Anyway, but Green Star is kind of nice because it has these kind of minty green veins on the older leaves that are almost in a star shape. The new growth is pretty pale, but you get these really wide secondary veins and a wide midrib. Makes a really interesting plant. And that's just a very young example. It got to be considerably more beautiful than that over time. This is also from our trials, and I took this picture because this was our biggest cultivar at the time the trial started. By the time it ended, they were all even huger, because we grew a lot of them outside in North Carolina. They love the heat and humidity of the southeast, by the way. But you got to keep them watered. If they dry out, that's trouble. So these were our two, the biggest one and the smallest one, and they were both from the Illusion series. And by the way, Illusion is a trademark name in some cases. Some of the Illusion series are a registered trademark. In other cases, Illusion is part of the cultivar name, and we kind of follow the University of Florida's literature to decide what is what, as well as the patents. Because you cannot patent a plant with a trademark name, and you can't trademark something with a cultivar name. They have to be they're two separate things. So some of the Illusions are actually registered trademarks. Others, they're just part of the cultivar name. The really big one here is Berry Illusion. It's a pink that fades much more whitish, palish. But that's a beautiful plant. It's not as all pink as Neon Robust, and some of the others, but it's available everywhere, and it's really beautiful. And the smallest little one was Pixie Cream Illusion, which is grown in this little bonsai pot. But even when we put it out in the large pots, it just stayed small. It's a great terrarium plant. People say, oh, you put a Syngonium in a terrarium, it'll just strangle everything. No, if you take the Pixie series, and there's several of them. There's Pixie White, Pixie Pink. I saw one called Fairy Pink the other day, I think it is. And I've got some others that don't even seem to have names. But anything in this that says Pixie in front of it, they stay really small. Apparently they're dwarfed from tissue culture. That's what I was told, that they were. They came from like Cream Illusion and Pink Illusion, and because of the tissue culturing, it changed the gibberellins and so on. So the leaves don't expand and they don't have the thick stems. But as you can see here, this little bonsai pot, that's a great plant. And you put that in a terrarium. Holy heck, that's great. So I'm going to end there. I don't want to be too long-winded. I'm always long-winded. Sorry about that. So anyway, go to cultivar.org, click on our Syngonium thing, and you'll get the entire encyclopedia of 272 cultivars. Again, if you have information, data, not just an opinion, if you have literature, an expert opinion that can be documented, published, so on, please let us know, and we'll make some changes. If you have a cultivar we don't have in there, let us know. We'd really love to add that. And if you have an alternate opinion, we'll present that. And of course, the more evidence you have, the better. So anyway, thanks for your time, and keep on growing those Syngoniums.